Hi, this is Dr. Sana Hashmi, and I'm a fellow at Taiwan Asia Exchange Foundation. This week, in my Print EyeOnChina column, I dug into the Chinese discourse and what are the Chinese views on the conviction of Jimmy Lai, who was the Hong Kong media tycoon. So the news is the latest news that has got a lot of attention on the Chinese media among strategic community is that he has been convicted on national security charges that ended a legal saga that lasted 5 years. He was arrested in December 2020 after the national security law in Hong Kong came into being. So he was once celebrated as a symbol of Hong Kong's democracy. He was seen as a democracy beacon, but now he is being portrayed in the Chinese media as a serious threat to national security. So what happened? On 15 December, Hong Kong's High Court found Lai guilty on two counts of conspiring to collude with foreign forces and one count of conspiring to publish seditious material. So these charges were brought under, as I already mentioned, Hong Kong's national security law, which Beijing introduced in 2020, and that was the beginning when how Beijing started reshaping what dissent looks like in China, what media can do, and how people interact with foreign entities, and giving the state wide ranging powers to judge and control political behavior. So this was actually a kind of a scrutiny, a kind of government measure so that media is being controlled primarily in Hong Kong. In China, much of the media is, of course, state owned, state controlled, and they toe the line of the government. But Hong Kong was entirely different, specifically before 2019. And there have been changes specifically under Xi Jinping. So this law actually brought in to change the media dynamics, the so-called freedom of a speech, how it is supposed to look in Hong Kong as well. So in Lai's trial, the NSL, the National Security Law, didn't just shape this verdict. It also shaped the story around him, the narrative about around him and his arrest and his conviction. So the law made it possible to convict people on a very broadly, very vaguely defined national security grounds. And it showed how legal rules and media narratives work together to draw the lines of acceptable politics in Hong Kong and acceptable media roles in Hong Kong. So now coming back to how the Chinese media and how the online commentary is framing this entire episode. So across multiple Chinese online platforms, reporting follows very standardized language. Lai is called the mastermind behind the Hong Kong version of the Color Revolution. He's being called as an instigator of anti-China riots in Hong Kong. And phrases like anti-China and colluding with foreign forces get repeated so often that they leave little room for any nuanced perspective on this, making it very clear, specifically for the Chinese domestic audience, that who is right, and primarily the Chinese government in this case. So the symbols of democracy are mostly erased from this story. So this is something that is very interesting point, that how all the beacons, all the people who were in the front line of democracy in Hong Kong are being erased, and their narrative, their story is being rewritten by the Chinese government. His media empire isn't really seen as a champion of press freedom. It is really being portrayed or being written, discussed as something that could resonate with press freedom, but largely it is portrayed as a tool for political manipulation. And his democratic ideals are barely mentioned at all. The law's terms like collusion with foreign forces or subversion are treated as natural and unquestionable. And in this narrative, in this framing, Lai is hardly being reported or hardly being mentioned as a journalist or a media personality. He is being portrayed as a political operator serving foreign interest and undermining Hong Kong's one country, two system setup. And some commentators even use historical comparisons. There was this one blogger who actually likened Lai to a member of Mao Zedong era Gang of Four, And there was another commentator who pointed out that Hong Kongers who moved to UK after following Lai's ideology are not as welcome in the UK. They realized it much later. Now they're regretting it, but now for them the doors for China have been closed. So these stories, narratives, they're highlighting the story of betrayal, misguidance, and the personal cost of opposing the state. And Hong Kongers are at the receiving end, sadly, for this. So now, Lai story is being tied to foreign interference, and he is said to be part of this perceived cross-border network connecting foreign foundations, legal actors, media, and street protest. This is how they're categorizing Hong Kong protest, and Hong Kong's unrest is framed as orchestrated from abroad. So, of course, there is hardly any mention of the erosion of democracy in Hong Kong and how the Hong Kongers feel about this democratic crackdown and what they're seeing that this is all been orchestrated, influenced by actors who are based abroad, Western powers, foreign organizations. And in this context, a columnist noted that the US historically used similar non governmental channels primarily during the Cold War period, and foreign concern about Lai's conviction isn't really about anxiety, isn't really about justice, but it's about protecting their own network of influence. Their proxy is being dismantled, the proxy is being diminished. So Lai becomes, in this narrative, in this framing, an American chess piece, and his conviction is proof that China successfully countered that influence. So this is a narrative that has been surfaced on the Chinese internet. And in fact, Chinese commentary is framing the government reaction, the verdict, the conviction as firm and uncompromising, and as, of course, rock solid. So, despite international attention, including foreign representatives at the trial, call from US President Donald Trump to save people, and also the statement from major countries about this verdict, China is portrayed by the domestic online users as unyielding, and the court's judgment is described as evident based and immune to outside pressure. That China is actually standing up to the bullies. China is now taking control of its own interest and actually punishing who are colluding and working with the foreign government. Some even say that Lai's prosecution is just diffuse, with China itself being the real target. So they're portraying China as the main target and Lai as just one of the pawn in the greater China US China West rivalry. And his conviction is framed as a lawful, necessary step to dismantle channels of foreign influence. And in fact, there was this post on Chihu, that is kind of Chinese Reddit, which called the verdict as a benchmark. And it explained further that anyone crossing the red lines of the Chinese national security will face the consequences. So this narrative is also demonstrative of how there is a surge of nationalism within China, within the online users, and so there's a surge in nationalistic sentiments in China. So the idea is that dissent might still exist, which is hardly there in China. So, of course, just to have this online conversation, there are a number of users who said that is it okay to have a dissenting view, but uh, there there needs to be more respect for the government. Um, and but I feel that even though we talk about how we do not really see any sympathy or empathy towards will Jimmy Lai, is primarily because of the censorship, self censorship, as well as state censorship. But what I've also realized during my research for this column is that the dominance of this framing isn't just about self censorship, state censorship. It isn't just about repressing their views. It's also that there is a lot of resonance with respect to what the government has been doing. It's protecting its own national security by punishing those who are endangering China's sovereignty and colluding with the foreign government. So, by linking dissent, media activity, and foreign engagement to national security, now Beijing has normalized the punishment of individuals, persecution of the organizations in the name of security. And I would say that the convictions that have happened and that are also going to happen in times to come. And specifically, this Lai case is becoming both legal marker as well as it's a tool to shape public perception. And I think it is definitely working when it comes to shaping the domestic perception and the support of the people. Even though China is an authoritarian state, there is a lot of resonance among people with respect to how China is handling the so-called uh, dissent and the freedom of speech. So I think this is something that is very visible when it comes to reading the Chinese commentary. And the fact that there's hardly any support for Jimmy Lai on the Chinese internet in the Chinese commentary is a telling sign of how the government is shaping the narrative, not only at the global level, but also within the domestic audience. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.